Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Charlene Aaron. Tensions rising higher on the Crimean Peninsula after Russian President Vladimir Putin claimed control of the territory on Monday. Today, the Russian flag flies over Ukrainian Navy's headquarters in Sevastopol after pro-Russian forces seized the building. Meanwhile, Vice President Joe Biden is in Lithuania, assuring U.S. allies that it will stand by them if Russia gets more aggressive. George Thomas reports.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin's bold military moves have left much of the world reeling and on edge.
The crisis in Ukraine is the most serious test of European security in the 21st century so far.
Nearly 3 weeks after marching his troops across the Black Sea Peninsula, a proud Putin declared to thousands of cheering Muscovites in Red Square that Crimea was finally back on the Russian map.
У нас сегодня очень радостный, светлый праздничный день.
In neighboring Ukraine, unease and despair are setting in as the political crisis takes its toll. Months after tens of thousands of Ukrainians took to the streets of Kiev, there is still an air of uncertainty that lingers over this nation.
Business is worsening.
And a weak government here can only watch as Russia continues to deploy more troops along its border. This morning, armed gunmen stormed the Ukrainian naval base in Crimea, raising the Russian flag. It came a day after an Ukrainian officer was killed by Russian forces. The Baptist Christian who leads Ukraine's interim government says Putin's actions are a threat to the world.
I would like to remind you of the history. World War II started with the annexation of the territory of other countries by fascist Germany. Today, the president of Russia, Mr. Putin, who likes to talk about fascism a lot, is copying the fascists of the last century.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warned Putin that he was, quote, on the wrong side of history, while Vice President Joe Biden, traveling in Poland, said America will consider sending additional troops to the region to reassure Eastern European allies,
including rotating U.S. forces to the Baltic region to conduct ground and naval exercise, as well as training missions.
But will this and increased U.S. and European sanctions be enough to stop an advancing Putin? Probably not. For now, leaders in Kiev and Western capitals can only watch and worry about how far Mr. Putin will go. George Thomas, CBN News.
And joining us now with more is Dr. Mary Manjikian of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Well, what is Putin's end game? Do you think he'll stop with Crimea?
I do not think he's going to stop with the Crimea. The president of Moldova has already made a statement regarding the Transdnistrian Republic, which is a Russian-speaking part of Moldova. And he's already said to Putin, hands off. But the fact that he's thinking about that suggests that there may be people anywhere really that borders Russia that are getting nervous about sort of what piece of my territory is he looking at next.
Wow. Well, is this the beginning of a new Cold War, or is it something different?
I would say that it is something different. I don't think it's primarily ideological. I think it's primarily strategic. Certainly getting access to that warm water port at Sevastopol was strategic and military. And certainly when he is thinking about relations with Europe and the borders with Europe, those are primarily, I would say, strategic issues, not ideological issues.
Definitely. Well, Mitt Romney wrote an op-ed calling this latest proof of Obama's failed leadership. What do you have to say about that? Do you agree with that?
I think Mitt Romney is a really smart man. He wrote an article in 2008 when Russia was interfering in the affairs of the Georgian Republic of the former Soviet Union, and he talked about something called revanchism. He talked about a movement where you go back and you make a historic claim and you attempt to redraw borders. And he got it exactly right. However, I would say that it's really more of an intelligence failure. I think at some point we're going to have a conversation at the CIA at Langley, and we're going to say, how did we manage to get Russia wrong again for the second time?
Wow. It's pretty interesting. Well, what can the West do at this point to stop Putin from continuing to take over parts of Ukraine and even other countries? What can we do?
I think that what they're doing is exactly right. My understanding is that there's going to be increased NATO exercises in the Baltic Republic. There's going to be a show of force. And at this point, it looks like, we're sort of going to meet force with force. They're not going to back down, and neither are we.
Wow. Well, Russia controls energy supplies to Europe through Ukraine. What's the danger there?
The danger is that, they would cut off energy supplies. I guess it's less of a danger because it's spring. I'd be a lot more worried if it were February. But the problem with all this great power politics always is that it's the people at the bottom that suffer and not the people at the top. It'll be the regular citizens who are going to be worried about being cold on a cold winter night.
The everyday folks.
Yep.
Dr. Manjikian, thanks for joining us today.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate it. Well, new clues today as the investigation into the disappearance of Flight 370 expands by air, sea, and land. Military officials in Thailand now say radar data shows an unidentified plane, possibly Flight 370, starting minutes after the Malaysian jet's transponder signal was lost. Investigators are zeroing in on an area the size of Texas in the South Indian Ocean, where satellite data suggests the plane could have gone.
You're on your way to Antarctica at that point. The good news here is that we have the Australians with the NTSB now in charge of this investigation.
And new clues today. Thailand's military reports that its radar detected a plane that may have been Flight 370 just minutes after the jetliner's communications went down. Thai officials say they didn't share the information earlier because no one asked for it. Meanwhile, the search for answers is ongoing. If the plane was in trouble, officials say it didn't send any signal.
There were a number of distress beacons on board the aircraft, and we know that they have not been activated because we are the receiving authority for such alert.
The investigation into why Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 vanished has taken another strange turn. Investigators can't rule out catastrophic system failure, but say all signs point to a deliberate act. Theories abound as to the fate of the 777 jetliner and its passengers, including some pilots speculating on the internet. One suggests an electrical fire erupted in the cockpit and that the aircraft's abrupt turn westward is a clue that the pilot was trying to land at the nearest airport. Another pilot with 25 years' experience says all facts point to a terrorist hijacking. He says the plane could be on the ground somewhere, being loaded with bombs or even chemical weapons to carry out a future attack. Meanwhile, 2 Malaysian fishermen told local police they saw a jumbo jet flying low above the waters between Malaysia and Vietnam about the time the airliner would have been in the area. Malaysian officials say the top priority remains finding any of the debris from the plane, something many say is like finding a needle in a haystack. And police are also investigating the plane's pilots. Malaysian officials say files were recently deleted from a flight simulator found at the captain's home. Here at home, the Obama administration has shut down the Syrian embassy in Washington and ordered all non-U.S. personnel to leave the country.
In consideration of the atrocities the Assad regime has committed against the Syrian people, we have determined it is unacceptable for individuals appointed by that regime to conduct diplomatic or consular operations here in the United States.
The Syrian government recently announced it will no longer provide services for Syrians in the U.S. Operations at Syrian consulates across the country also have been suspended. New revelations about NSA spying this morning. The Washington Post reports the spy agency has been recording every phone call in one foreign country and listening to the conversations 1 month later. The paper did not identify the country at the request of the government officials. The program is the latest to come to light after leaks by former NSA employee Edward Snowden. Many of the nation's best cancer hospitals are off limits under Obamacare. The Associated Press made that discovery through a nationwide survey of comprehensive cancer centers with higher survival rates. Only 4 of 19 top cancer hospitals say patients have access through all the insurance companies in their state exchange. That means many cancer patients may not be able to get the most advanced life-saving treatments, including clinical trials of new medications. And cancer patients shopping online in the new insurance markets will have a tough time finding out if top hospitals are included in a plan. Even well-known insurance companies are scaling back cancer coverage under the Obamacare exchanges. The moderate quake that shook California Monday has officials warning people to be prepared with emergency kits and a safety plan in case a larger one hits. Scientists warn that if a 9.0 magnitude earthquake were to hit California's northern coast, it would have a catastrophic ripple effect. The Los Angeles Times reports experts say a giant tsunami would wash away coastal towns and cost $70 billion in damage over a large part of the Pacific coast. And people in lightly populated regions would only have about 15 minutes warning. Well, earthquakes can devastate an entire city or region in many ways. Depending on the strength and location, it can kill hundreds or destroy natural and cultural landmarks. So you can guard against an earthquake and protect. Can you guard against an earthquake and protect history? CBN's Chris Mitchell reports on a recent meeting exploring that possibility.
The walled city of Jerusalem is instantly recognizable, and one symbol stands above the rest.
The Tower of David is the symbol of it's the gateway actually to the old city and also to the new one.
Museum director Eilat Lieber gave us a rare look at the panoramic view of Jerusalem from the Tower of David. Its history and value are unquestioned, and many wonder, could it and other Jerusalem relics withstand an earthquake? Nature forced Italy to answer that question twice in 2009 and 2012. Major earthquakes killed hundreds and destroyed numerous buildings, including historical sites.
Our job is to help people, of course, and to prop up and ensure buildings damaged by earthquakes.
Luca Ponticelli shared his earthquake experience and what he learned at this recent seminar.
I was one of the experts that implemented our technical procedures to shore or to prop up the buildings. So my mission here is to explain our job.
It's all part of an international project to protect historical sites from earthquakes. The Tower of David here in the center of Jerusalem is the first heritage site to be chosen in Israel for this international project. It's been installed with a special monitoring system from the top all the way down to the bottom. The system monitors cracks in the tower and the region's seismic activity. The last major earthquake to hit Jerusalem was in 1927. Israel straddles the Jordan Rift Valley, and experts predict it's time for another.
We had earthquakes, we will have earthquakes.
Dr. Avi Shapira heads up the effort to prepare Israel for such a disaster.
What we are urging our engineering community and all the national authorities is really to check the capacity of this structure to withstand earthquake and do something if possible, and it is possible.
The goal for Shapira and others is to preserve Jerusalem's treasures like the Tower of David.
Everybody's talking about the big earthquake that's coming, and we must be part of the academic research.
You know, we live in the Holy Land, and not only the Holy Land, but Promised Land. And we have also to promise our children and grandchildren that something will remain for them to see.
Chris Mitchell, the Tower of David, Jerusalem.
Coming up, America's fast expanding Latino population, how the Republican Party is reaching out to this growing group of voters. Senator Ted Cruz says the Obama administration is more hostile to religious freedom than any other administration in history. Cruz gave the keynote address at Homeschool Iowa Lobbying Day. Addressing a crowd of more than 500 homeschoolers, he said there is no liberty more important than religious liberty and denounced the federal government's attacks on it. Cruz is considered a potential Republican presidential candidate in 2016. This month marks a demographic milestone, and it shows how the face of America is changing. The Pew Research Center reports Latinos will overtake whites to become California's largest racial ethnic group. They will officially make up 39% of the most populous state, pulling in front of the 38.8% who are non-Hispanic and white. The Latino electorate across the country is expected to jump from 23 million to 40 million by 2030. However, experts say right now Hispanic political power is lagging because of economic and organizational weakness. The Republican Party is trying to pull some of those Latino voters into its camp with a new outreach to minority voters. This week, the GOP begins a new ad campaign targeting minorities, especially Hispanics and women.
I believe a strong military equals a strong America.
I believe there shouldn't be so much red tape.
I vote for religious freedom.
Every human life is worth protecting.
I vote for an all-of-the-above energy policy.
I'm a Republican.
I'm a Republican.
I'm a Republican.
Yo soy republicano.
I believe in opportunity for all, and I'm a Republican.
The campaign will air in 14 states and mostly run on channels targeting women and minorities like Bravo, Food Network, and Telemundo. The GOP also hopes to gain younger voters by airing the ads on streaming sites like Hulu. Back in 2012, the Obama administration used a similar ad strategy, which proved to be very successful. Up next, a message to the pro-choice crowd. Abortion isn't the only option. Hear why 2014 is being called the year of adoption. Next. Every year, about 1 million couples in America are seeking to adopt a child, and every year, about 1 million women in America abort their unborn babies. If those babies could be adopted rather than aborted, it would both end abortion and solve the adoption crisis. Recently, Paul Strand met a woman whose life shows adoption is a beautiful thing.
At January's March for Life, the call went out to declare 2014 the year of adoption. The goal? Showcase its positive results by sharing the stories of moms who chose life.
Believe it or not, some mothers actually think it's better for their unborn babies to abort them than to give them to families who want to adopt them. Marissa Cope's entire life shouts out, this just isn't true. Adoption can be a beautiful thing.
Marissa can only express gratitude for the young mom and dad who created her.
My biological parents, I certainly hope, have the peace of mind of knowing that they chose life for me and they chose a beautiful life for me.
Marissa, oddly enough, grew up with a mom who looks almost exactly like her.
Our physical similarity is quite striking, and I look as much like my parents as my brother does, who is their biological child.
Now married to the towering J. Marty Cope, Marissa's just had her own baby. That experience has her reflecting on her own childhood that brings nothing but happy memories about being adopted.
It was presented to me from birth that this was a positive thing in a way that our family was built and grown. And so it's something that we've always celebrated. Good jokes through the years with my brother that, it took a little more to get me. I didn't come the easy way.
She sees it as a parallel to Christians' relationship with God.
We serve a God who loves adoption. He works through adoption. He adopts us in Christ.
In fact, Marissa and her family believe her first moment with them reflects how Jesus Christ sees all his people.
My brother was 6 years old when I was adopted, and the agency had a policy that the older sibling, if they were old enough, could actually be the one to carry out the baby on that day to present them to the family.
Marissa's new brother scooped her up in his arms with pride to present her to her new parents.
So he brings me out, and I've had spiky hair going everywhere, and he says, "Isn't she pretty? Doesn't she look just like me?"
Marissa points out what that moment is like.
The love of Christ for us as he presents us to the Father and says, "Isn't she pretty? Doesn't she look just like me?"
Marissa uses that comparison as an encouragement for abortion opponents to step in and experience such moments for themselves.
A lot of times in critiques of pro-lifers, you hear it time and again, well, go out and adopt the babies if you care so much about them.
Marissa says she's felt so much love from both her own newborn and the young Ethiopian boy her brother adopted. So she speaks from experience when she promises parenthood will bring great blessing.
This is the most rewarding thing you've ever done in your life, and an adopted child, just like a biological child, is a gift.
But pro-lifers realize they're going against the grain in what's now a pro-abortion culture, where a place like Planned Parenthood aborts 145 babies for every one it helps get adopted. Marissa works at Heroic Media, whose mission is to convince women not to abort their babies.
Sometimes, in the mind of a woman, because of what she hears in our culture, abortion is a more humane choice than choosing adoption.
They've done in-depth research showing what women need to hear before they'll accept adoption, like how they can pick the family who will raise their child and get support during the months of pregnancy.
I'm pregnant, but I'm not in a position to care for this child. I want him to have a better future, to be with a family who'll love him and give him the things that I can't. I've learned that through adoption, I can choose the family who will raise him. And I can receive help through the rest of my pregnancy.
Surveys show these ads work. They aired over a 4-year period in Austin, and the number of abortions dropped.
The state of Texas reported over that same 4-year period a decrease in the abortion ratio by over 20%.
Marissa tells of one New York City woman set on abortion. She saw one of these pro-life ads featuring a number she could dial for help.
She called the number and she chose life and adoption for her child. So we've seen women who were pursuing abortion, had the appointment, and chose life and adoption instead.
2014 is the year of adoption, and organizations like Marissa's are begging women who are considering abortion to instead consider adoption. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Finally, this morning, some overlooked veterans from past wars finally received recognition for their heroic service, the Medal of Honor. Recently, Congress identified past service members of Jewish or Hispanic heritage who they believe were denied the honor due to discrimination. They found 24 Army veterans who served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Only 3 are still alive today. At a White House ceremony Tuesday, they and their family members, 20 members of the 21 others, received the Medal of Honor. Finally, long overdue. Well, that's going to do it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. Tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day. God bless.